as most of you know, this is David Foster with On the Offense for Renewed, which has become something of a nice tradition, one of our ongoing education efforts. And today's session's with Tom Gale from MDM, longtime member and founding member of Renewed. So it's someone who's been there in the trenches getting this whole new thing going. And Tom's particular perspective on all the scarce resource bets he's made over the years and finding success and failure along the way, I think is in many ways has been a model for a lot of us. Many of the people on the call today are good friends of Tom's, so a lot of you know a lot about his adventures, but I think looking at how they played out now since COVID is extraordinary and noteworthy, and so Tom, I appreciate your being willing to do this on behalf of everyone at Renewed. So welcome.
Well, thank you, David. I'm going to try to live up to your marketing expertise in terms of the description that you did on this.
Yeah. That sounds like a good goal. And now we also have to compete with somebody else's webinar recording that's playing at the same time. So we're really gonna have to up our game, I think, for this one. So again, as all of you know, the format is I'll try to sort of do the conversational part with Tom in about 25 minutes and then open up to discussion around those points, because there's a lot to discuss here. I think some very important themes that we'll all want to engage. So I'd maybe just start with a quick question, Tom, on sort of the long view, since MDM's got a 50-year history. It's one of the longer standing companies in the business, which is a wonderful thing, but it's also a great challenge when you're trying to affect change. You go from that long history to suddenly finding yourself with 600 people on a Zoom call at the beginning of COVID. Could you just talk about that surprise and what you think led up to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, and just briefly, Dave, I know most of the people on here today, but just for a little bit of context for those who don't know what we are, we cover wholesale distribution channels, and it's all management issues in terms of a lot of trend research that we do. We have an audience of about 20,000. I bought it in 1992. It's been around since 1967 as a twice a month newsletter. And about 15 years ago, we were still 90% entirely subscription revenues. Subscription revenues are now down below 10%. And so a lot of my story really today is about diversification. And, I've had many discussions with people on here today. Some of the things I think I've been able to monetize effectively, and other things not so much, but I think I've done a pretty good job in terms of building the community piece, in terms of where we've been able to evolve, and particularly with we've been going through for the last year and a half. So I just wanted to give that context, because we really, starting about 15 years ago, started to get into sponsorships, which now are probably about a third of our revenues. About a third of our revenues are actually in analytics. About 11 years ago, I bought an analytics company that focused on providing data and some insights around what the size of industrial and construction product markets are in North America, and that's been an important component too. So the piece, I guess, in terms of where we are today as this hybrid model, is we're struggling with what a lot of other people, I think, are around. Actually, the one thing that you wrote in here is our subscription revenues have been the one thing that's actually been going into a nosedive over the last few years, and that's really what's prompted our journey this year and last year and into this year to really take a look at going into more of a membership model, and I know we're going to get into that in a little bit.
Have you, so since almost everyone on the call has subscription revenues as a component, is it partially pirating that you think has caused that to dwindle in your case? And is that something all of us should be careful about? Or what's your perspective on why you've been uniquely hit in that area while you succeeded in other places?
I think it's a combination of things, really. It's kind of like a paper cut that has continued to just get more painful over the last 3 to 4 years.
Ouch.
Some of it is some of what we've all face in terms of there's just a lot more free content out there, particularly with the pandemic. Every consultant went into the publishing business if they hadn't been in it before. And so I think there was an uptick in that. I think associations were kind of woken up by the pandemic, and they started to make some alliances with consultants and really up their game on the content side, is what we've experienced as well. Yep. So those are a couple of things on that side of just, there's a lot more free content out there than there used to be. But a good amount of it was self-inflicted in terms of, and I've talked with many people here, about 3 to 4 years ago, as part of my succession plan, I'm in my, well, you and I are the same age, but we're just over 65. And, you know, I have a plan to be done sometime in the next 4 or 5 years. And so I tried to bring in somebody and from the industry that we cover. That didn't work out. And so really the last 2 years, we sort of been on this rebound, but it's actually, it's been a very positive journey in terms of really forcing me, but also our team members, in terms of where do we need to go and what do we need to do right now, because of the sort of we have more existential threats right now than we've ever had, I think.
Yeah. Well, I've always, in all the conversations that all of us, you know, that I've shared with you in the past, and that many people in this call have shared with you, I think all of us, I know I've been impressed by your willingness to take, big bets on trying to transform the company. And as you said, some of those don't, always work out the way you want to. You just mentioned one. And I know you've taken some big bets recently that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes that are working out and are leading in the right direction. But I think some of the transformation and the way you plan, I know, has been based on taking advice from others, people in the Renew group, using a leadership system from outside the group. I know you mentioned, Rob Bristaños, who's on the call today, Dan Fink, hey there. You've mentioned others who have helped you with this particular transition, not just for thanks, but for practical examination of sort of what you learned and how it's guided you. Would you mind just sharing some of the high points of how you transform both yourself and your business plan?
So, I mean, this goes back to my first NPA meeting in 1987, but just the community of the people and, the generosity. And this is a broken record for everybody on this call, but I just kept sort of absorbing the experience of people who have been a lot more successful and driven growth in this industry than I have. And what that came out for me really is diversification. So in terms of talking about, big, hairy bets, I never bought that. I never bet the company. I got some really good advice several years ago from a friend who knew me and the business. He said, this isn't something to bet the farm on. He said, you've got a pretty good farm. So actually we're in Colorado. So he said ranch, not farm, but the
Thank you for translating for the Flatlanders.
The point I'm trying to make is that I'm only so risk tolerant, and I really I couldn't have done this or taken the kind of flyers to try to kickstart growth and take that level of risk to try to grow the company if we hadn't had as much diversification in revenue. I wouldn't have been able to diversify the revenue in the company if I hadn't gone to all the SIPA sessions and NPA sessions and been part of this community where I've really been able to learn from people who have really specialized in these different areas and really monetize them extremely effectively. So that's where, you know, from me, I've just tried to listen to a lot of people, including several people on this call who have just been really, you know, good advisors, share a lot of what their experience has been and failures as well as successes. But it's really that diversification piece that I could never have thought about trying to make those bets and I guess putting as much chips on one effort to try to grow and be able to afford to have that actually fail. That the succession plan is actually an example of that. In terms of, it was a pretty big investment in a major departure from sort of the model that I've been developing over the years. But what's come out of that actually is, you know, this year we are up so far 30% over 2019, about 20% over last year. And it's all about that diversification because our subscriptions have continued to go down. Yeah. What we did last year towards the end of the year, well, I don't want to get ahead, but where you're going with that question, I think just to fill in the gaps here, is we launched at the end of last March a weekly 1 to 2 hour Zoom program every Friday afternoon for our audience. And it was really, we called it MDM Live. And it was myself and an industry consultant that I've worked with for 25 years. And we basically, he has a lot more personality than I have. So in terms of radio, it really helped me. But we were bringing on a lot of in our industry. And every week we would bring on 2 to 3 people, interview them, and have a conversation around how they were pivoting and you know, adjusting and what they were doing with their teams and during the pandemic. And that's where we started to get that 600, 700 attendees every week to those Zoom meetings. And ever since then, we continue to really benefit because that really solidified at a time of where we were kind of going through this transition of where we were going to go next, really solidified the strength of the community that we had built. And that really provided a strong platform for our team to kind of push off of. That kicked into, and we actually discontinued that going into later summer because it started to go down and people started getting really saturated with Zoom. What that kicked off, though, is our thinking about, okay, you know, our subscription revenues are tanking. Everything else is really healthy, actually. What do we need to do about this? And basically, we haven't changed the subscription model for 25 years. Yeah. And so that's where I've been following the membership model and the ways that people have been going about trying to do that journey. And that's where in the fall, that's where we brought in Rob Ristagno and Sterling Group to do some research for us around our core segmentation. It's really helped our team in terms of thinking, keeping our focus in terms of really what are our key segments where we're really going to monetize, but also how we structure our content as well. So
could you talk quickly about any specifics that come to mind about, it sounds like market segmentation, bundling products, those are some of the elements, but are those like the key elements you would say in this transition to enhance kind of a membership model that you worked on with Rob?
I would say that we've always done a mediocre job of really communicating our value proposition. I came out of the content side, not the business side or marketing side. And so MDM has always been a content first company. And so in what we've done and done this year is actually we've at the beginning of this year, we hired a real marketer and actually brought some marketing expertise into the company. And at a high level, we've also brought a graphic designer in internally, which we'd never done before. and basically trying to put the pieces together to really reposition, rebrand what we're doing, and really focus on the marketing side of things to strengthen the content team. So we've always been unbalanced in that way. And so in terms of really thinking about growth strategies, it became painfully obvious that, we have a branding, we have a marketing problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a core value proposition problem that we're still wrestling with. We were going to try to launch this thing, July 1st, and now it was October 1st. It may actually get pushed back to January 1st because, we're really committed to do this right. And so we may do a sort of a partial rollout, but it's like we need to get it right the first time. And thankfully, we have enough of a cushion and to be able to do it the right way and not be in survival mode. And we got to get this out the door and drive revenues right now. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble. So it's in a good position to be in.
So did I kind of hear you say, and this is maybe a little different than what I understood, but because you are traditionally a content company, as you said, but it sounds like a little bit like the investments you had to make for this transition to work were a content-oriented marketing person you talked about, bringing in some branding expertise, that kind, and changing the business model around a membership model, those are sort of more, I would say all of those are more, they have a marketing component. So would you say that you made MDM a more marketing-driven company out of that transition, or is that incorrect?
Yes.
Yeah.
You want more of an answer than that, I know. So this was really the key thing actually about bringing Rob on board, because of that fact that we had not had this marketing orientation. So it's like, I'm not the one to drive that. And so first, to do the customer research and have him conduct that as a baseline was really valuable. But then after that, we really framed his help with us is to really address that in terms of how can we make this more of a marketing driven organization? What does that branding look like? How can we clarify our value proposition? So his sort of outside perspective from our industry really helped us get that kind of expertise to take a look at, okay, who what do we need, right people in the right seats to get this done? Where do we need to focus on, and what does that look like? So again, coming back to kind of all the noise that's out there for all of us now and what that looks like, and how do we resurrect our subscription model? It became really obvious we need to migrate that into a membership model, but we need to be really clear about how are we differentiating from all the other stuff that's out there. And so where we're going with this is really around becoming, it's actually just strengthening the position that we've really always had, where we've been, a higher level specialized content company, but really focus on the research components and the report components that we focus on and have been really good at historically. So that's really where the content team is going, and how we're revising the way that we package and deliver our content is more from a market research perspective than an editorial perspective.
Well, so that I know you've added, say, high level product leadership, like Tish, who did a session for Renewed last week. I think with Rob was also on that one, if I remember correctly. And I know you've talked about, more digital editors, that sort of thing. So that transition is more towards, would you say, towards thought leadership in the market segments within the distributor? So has that change kind of occurred, and has that driven the membership model, or describe it more accurately than what I just did?
Yeah,
Almost all of these people.
There's a combination of things really, and one of them is because we actually tap into a community of thought leadership And that's one of the strengths that we have that other people don't have. So we are, one of our focus points is on fostering sort of that inner circle of thought leaders, and sort of curate them as part of our team, and do that more proactively than we have in the past. So that's one layer of it. Internally, it is to restructure the way that we actually write articles. One, to make them shorter, easier, key takeaways. I mean, everybody's doing that type of thing. I think just that's the way people are consuming information. But the other piece of this is really to it's not so much the thought leadership internally, but it is to try to have our team. Basically, our team has been so strapped the last couple of years in terms of not having bandwidth, but they've just been kind of churning out and haven't been able to really do the more in-depth analysis pieces that really used to be our core. So we've kind of lost our path over the last couple of years, and what I think we're doing is really coming back to what made us successful, but repackaging that and unbundling that so that it's really clear for people if they want these particular types of reports, whether it's economic data, market data, or the trend analysis or research pieces. We partner in a major quarterly survey that taps into more than $100 billion of revenues, more than 500 execs. That's a very powerful, report that we've been doing for more than 10 years. And we haven't been really leveraging the value of that and branding it and positioning it well. So
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm describing it any better than you, except those are the types of focus areas where we already have the puzzle pieces. It's really a matter of more of a marketing and repositioning and branding issue.
Well, we'll get to there. I can see there's some questions from Carol and others about the membership model. So we'll get to that during the M&A, but just following this line of thinking, you mentioned right at the top of the call, the fact that there's more outside threats, they're all of us have to deal with more noise. You use that word. And so some of these investments, I think, have allowed you to take your sort of thought leadership strength. And I think I've heard you use the term build kind of a content moat around the core segments in your market. And it seems like those of us who are able to do that are going to be in a much stronger position for the marketing and sales things we need to do, because you've got intellectual property that distinguishes itself at even a higher level, maybe would it. And I think that's a strategy you sort of executed better than some of the rest of us. Any thoughts about that kind of protective nature of how you did what you're describing?
Well, I think that's where we've really sort of lost our way, is that we used to have that content moat where we were head and shoulders above everybody else, but it got diluted. And that's really, to me, that's the key thing that we're working on here. And just to dive into a little excruciating detail, because it's important, I think, is part of the segmentation that Rob helped us with was around really identify, we found three segments. One were the people who came on, read our daily e-letter, never bought anything from us. Good to know them. The second was more sort of mid-market, independent operators, more entrepreneurial, smaller size companies. Let's just say maybe 20 million, 10 million, 20 million to 100 million. And then there's a whole nother sector there that is sort of the enterprise level. And what was important for us was to really get clarity around those two in terms of the needs of the entrepreneurial audience versus more of the enterprise. And everybody in here who serves those type of markets know that, but we had never really formally done that as a team. It's already had an impact in terms of our content team and how they're starting to focus, and our strategy for the next 12 months in terms of how we actually, have built out our content pillars and curriculum actually that they're going to focus on, and how that content gets built out. So that work has really informed not only from a, becoming this more balanced and marketing driven company, but it's really as importantly, I think it's really been informing how we put our content together to make sure that we're going to drive that growth, particularly in that enterprise level, where honestly there's a lot more money for us to make. Ultimately, they're going to spend a lot more money with us, and the type of content that we need to focus on to make sure we start to grow that. So that to me has been sort of the two key pieces of this transition that we've gone through in terms of how do we get growth out of this going forward. And so, I think we've been successful in terms of sort of incrementally where we've gotten to today, but I believe we're doing the right things so that as we get in, and probably it might, I think this is a couple-year process at least,
Yeah.
but I believe we're positioning ourselves to actually scale because there's a lot more opportunity in the industries that we serve here. So
yeah. So on the market side, it sounds like with Rob's help, you sort of, identified the core segment within the larger market, which is something obviously we've all been trying to do for years and years and years. But I think what I hear in your description is that is an iterative process. It never stops. And now during COVID, it has to, what you're doing has become even more intense. You're accelerating the effort, and focusing your resources there. Does Carol, do you want to ask your question? Because I think it sort of leads off of what Tom just said.
Yeah, so I actually want to get, we're a content company also, but I need to understand if you could sort of tell me, so let's say you write a story, or when you used to, or in your newsletters, you wrote a story, a piece of content.
Yeah.
How are you taking that content and now what are you doing with that actual piece? Because your content is this, I assume, is the same, but you're either telling it differently or marketing it differently.
Yeah.
Am I understanding that correctly?
So I would stop at you're writing the same stories, because we're in this transition period, and we're about to bring on another editorial team member. But where we are is that, and that's been part of the problem, is we've always kind of just written the stories and gone out there and shoved it out the door. But there's been no conversion strategy and thoughts about how that content is actually going to hit what segment in that. So where the shift has taken place is that we get ahead of the curve in terms of there's much more planning before there's even interviews being made, in terms of, we got 4 or 5 key content pillars, and they're what everybody has out there around strategy, around digital transformation. We happen to have really carved out a niche community in sales transformation over the last 5 years, and we do our conferences. We're about to have hopefully in November, have a live conference, our 5th annual of that, in Chicago. Where the shift really, Carol, is that rather than just churning the content out and then putting it out there, kind of shotgunning it's going to be much more around making sure on a monthly basis that, okay, we've got these 4 or 5 content pillars. How balanced are we in terms of hitting all of those, and then and then what segments are we targeting that content for specifically, in terms of, whether it's that entrepreneurial audience, the enterprise audience. And then the final piece here is, how are we going to measure that? And I'd really love feedback from people. We're looking really hard at Parsley. And if anybody knows anything or has any experience with that, I know AI has implemented some of that. So I really to me, that's kind of the final piece, because Parsley is going to give the kind of feedback from a content standpoint in terms of where our readers are actually spending their time and what they're doing as far as what they're consuming, and getting that feedback back to the content producers. So to me, that's kind of the key thing, is to create this whole cycle and loop now.
So let me just ask you, before, if you were a subscriber, you paid something. If you now become a member, do you pay, is it a higher price and you get more things?
Yes. So that we've done a couple of things, because and David mentioned this in terms of, you can kind of stick on with us the way you always have if you want, but we're going to offer some upgrade and give, we're going to give some nice trials for people in that, but
What's up?
I have the water guy there.
somebody's on.
Stephanie, I think that's
Canceled
you.
it. Oh, they're probably there to pick it up. That's what she was
Stephanie.
calling for today.
Stephanie,
Okay.
you're on mic.
Yeah.
So
Let me know when you're done. I have a question for you.
Sorry, I can't.
No worries.
Go
Hey,
ahead.
Robin,
So the
the water guy is there.
Sorry.
Well, they bring me.
Steph?
can somebody mute Stephanie? I don't think she realizes she's on.
Yeah,
All right, thank you, no problem.
I can. It's her
I'll just talk
account.
louder.
Okay, go ahead.
Now I lost my train of thought. Where was I, Carol?
I'm
I've lost-
adding stuff to membership.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So the tiers in terms of, so what we're going to really try to do is focus on the IP that we have. And this is primarily around some of the market, we're doing market forecasting in terms of across the specific kind of product areas that our audience is really interested in. And nobody else is doing that as on a granular level as we are. And again, it's a marketing issue. We have some great, actually the analytics part of our business is a SaaS platform that I bought 11 years ago. And that's operating very well. We have some very strong enterprise level customers in there. What we haven't done is really sort of marketed that across our broader audience. And so we're going to try to take that IP that we have around these quarterly surveys that we have, but also the market forecasting that we're doing. Then we're also supporting that actually by doing, by adding kind of a stronger economic benchmarking reporting, which we've always done around the industry, but we're expanding that in terms of also providing more macroeconomic monthly and quarterly reports, which we're actually white labeling from BVR in a partnership because they've created a great product that's part of their portfolio. And so we're actually being able to add that as sort of another benefit of membership. So that's not a primary one, but it absolutely strengthens our whole membership value proposition by being able to add on that component to it.
Yeah, maybe Carol, I'm sure there are more specifics there too, but certainly the overall trend, Tom, and what you just said is, I think, familiar to most of us, is sort of migrating from traditional, like kind of the newsier journalism around your industry to, you use the terms forecast, analytics. So you're layering a level of content on top of what might have been traditional subscription newsletter kind of content, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we still have people who say, oh yeah, I get the MDM magazine all the time. You guys do a great job.
Yeah.
And it's like they don't, our readers don't really think about the packaging, the delivery on that. They just, but they really appreciate the content. I mean, they value that content, as we historically have been head and shoulders, but unless we reposition as more of a market research positioning, we're going to get blown out of the market.
Yeah. Yeah. Could I maybe move a little bit? I'll jump to John's question. John Hitchcock was sort of putting this in perspective. John, if you don't mind, given that huge transition, go back to 1 year further to 2018. you obviously what you're saying is that the this membership model and the increasing overlay of member only benefits kind of thing has more than replaced the subscription revenue. You know,
Well,
Go ahead.
we haven't launched the membership yet. So membership revenues are zero. And so I wish our sub revenues and membership revenues did equal our 2018 revenues, but they don't. They are much lower, John.
yeah. Do you want to, Ed, do you want to chime in with a couple of your questions? Because they're around this topic too.
Yeah, well, you can see I was having a hard time actually formulating a question in there. It was more like run of mind or whatever. But just on the membership thing, this is something I've been thinking about just recently, particularly in the context of Renewed, because we are looking at developing some membership levels where it continues to be freely available to people, and the online programs are available to people, but that there will be some elements that will only be available at a higher tier, that you can't buy separately. And that's certainly been our approach. This just came up, Carol, as you were asking Tom your question, that having that the membership package isn't just a bundle of existing products, that it has some other things, access to data that you've created a partnership with, or that sort of thing, I think is important to have people feel that it's more than just a package where you get A for $10 and B for $10, but you can get them both for $15. To have more than that, I think helps turn it into a membership for people, and particularly when it's things like data services or other kinds of services. I think that's important. I just wanted to add that, and I'd be interested in your thinking on that, Tom.
Well, I mean, that's why a lot of our focus is on this forecasting aspect, because we can do a lot better job of communicating and marketing what that is, because there's a lot of value. I mean, because we essentially, the model that we've developed, and actually the business school at the University of Colorado here helped us develop this over several years, but it's a very specific forecasting model for all the different sectors. There's 19 sectors of distribution in North America, and for each one of those, we actually have a discrete forecast, and we have not marketed that, but that's an IP that nobody else has, or the ability to really replicate easily. So that's one of the key things. And I mean, just the other comment, Ed, and it's kind of come through here, and actually goes back, Carol, to what you said about the kind of whole creation of content. Is by us kind of backing up and starting with this whole strategic framework that we went through and reorienting the content team around this, and then having these weekly meetings in terms of content planning. It's all about, and then we get the feedback, presumably about Parsley. Ask me in a year from now, but presumably that's going to give us the kind of insight where we can actually start to create the content more with conversion strategy in mind, in terms of how do we take that non-paying segment that's still important to us, and then much more effectively convert them up the pyramid to where we want them to be. And that's what's driving my thinking and our team's thinking in terms of where do we take this, and taking the flaming out, burning embers of the subscription model. What does that look like? And honestly, I do think it's going to be a 2-year. I think we're going to have some success 12 months from now, but I really think it's going to just be an iteration here for the next 2 to 3 years. But I think we can get to I think this is the right way to approach it and go after. I really welcome anybody has comments or thoughts about, are we missing something here in the way we're looking at this?
Suzanne, I think you're getting a lot of empathy, most directly from Stephanie, who's Eidelman, who's commented that she's lived parallel lives. Suzanne, do you want to, like, to Tom's comment, jump in on some of the membership things?
Yeah, I've spent about half my career working in membership associations. So, and the other half in publishing proper. So the things that I've seen work are kind of access to those top level conversations. I just put in there, we had a client, he was a CPA. So he was used to accounting for his time and hourly fees. He referred to a concept and taught it through CPE programs all over the country, but as the $10,000 hour. That could be either with peers where he's exchanging ideas at a top level and you have that, light bulb go off and there's your, you've got something that's worth $10,000 and you just had the conversation about it. He also talked about the $10,000 hour and applied that concept to his conversations with clients. So he was also a guy who did not skip an opportunity, lunch, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and extracurricular activities to have those conversations with clients that we're going to uncover or likely to uncover. And he could put the dollar figure on it, those $10,000 opportunities. So I would say, on the membership association side, thinking about Renewed in particular, but also Tom, your business and others, it's getting you in the room with the people that can make a difference in your business.
Yeah.
And I've seen it work time and time again for associations and publishing companies.
So we're actually looking to, we have two membership components, and one is about 20% baked and the other's about 30% baked, and it's a little bit more down the road, but more immediately is this, we are looking at creating some sort of MDM inner circle and leveraging that thought leadership relationships that nobody else in the industry has. And that's an asset that we have that nobody else does. And so we're working on that. I don't have any answers, but that's part of the reason why I'm looking to probably postpone till January 1st, because as you say, Suzanne, I think that's a really important component of, hey, if you become a member and upgrade, you're going to have this inner circle access to the leading, consultants, thought leaders, where otherwise you're not going to get their attention. So that's one piece of it. We've also talked about doing some sort of a master class, probably with those same inner circle people, but some sort of video series where they create, probably small packages. We're not going to call it masterclass, but it's going to be something around that concept where, there's some video memes that they're addressing key industry issues and packaging that. And that's really, I think, going to create value for them. I mean, again, we're still baking this, but create value for them. From a production standpoint, that's definitely sometime probably later in 2022, because that takes a lot of effort and input to get it right.
I will add that if you're careful and sorry, I have wild dogs in the background, a pack of wild dogs. They happen to be mine. You can actually, if you carefully structure a program, get sponsorship of those types of forums. I've had that where I had a sponsor, a service provider, that it would benefit to hear that discussion, but we had strict rules on, you are a fly on the wall. You stand, in the perimeter, do not say a word. It's observation only. And
you see, I think if
ticket.
we're careful, I think we can sponsor those inner circle conversations and monetize it on that side as well. So
exactly, we had banks that were interested in hearing, the opinions of those certain industry leaders, and occasional vendors. Sometimes you can get more than one as long as they're non-competitive and work in different categories. So
I think it's interesting. And John, there are a number of examples, including among people on this call, and John Hitchcock just mentioned the transformation at institutional investor from, you know, a long time high price sort of trade journal to these membership groups. But I think the key math in that is realizing that, you know, as as Tom, you said, and other people alluded to, that you've got some core number of thought leaders within your market, and maybe that, you know, as subscription publishers or advertisers, we're used to dealing with, you know, 20,000 or 50,000 or 1,000, but your thought leadership group could be 10, or it might be 50, or it might be 200. You know, the number is going to be different in every market. But if you like maximizing your brand leadership around that group, and then taking the strategy into your, there have been a lot of questions about, you know, the free side of the market. How do you take that to the free side of the market? How do you maximize contact with those, say, you know, in BVR's case, it's about 50 people. So, you know, like, how do you monetize that? I think that's a common element for all of us. We're getting near the end of time, so I want to wrap up, but maybe Rob, one last thing, Rob, if you're there, and since memberships are such an important part of this, maybe do you just want to wrap it up for us by commenting on what you posted, just kind of the mindset difference, because I think that's a good exit strategy for this discussion. And then I'll wrap up after you, Rob.
All right, thanks. Yeah, I think the just having a product that follows a subscription business model and then calling it a membership doesn't really pass as a membership. And yeah, it's a little annoying to me when people call things like Netflix a membership. It's not really a membership. It's a product that has a subscription business model. Yeah. But in terms of membership, I think the key is to really nail the value proposition, the use case, the problem that you're solving. So like Renewed, I guess the problem that we're solving at Renewed is that we're all niche content creators, and we don't necessarily get a lot of attention from other types of resources. So we're the go-to resources for people who want to make better choices in their business, if you're in the space. And how we get there, it's not about these sessions, it's not about the event, it's not about potentially forums or potentially a newsletter or anything. It's not any specific product or service. It's really just this holistic view that that's the problem that we're out to solve. And if the company does a great job solving it, the members feel like they're part of a community. They feel like they're getting exclusive access. Like I could never get time on so-and-so's calendar if we weren't also in the same organization. And also, yeah, a little bit of kind of all you can eat. So there's always more benefits than you can actually consume. And so for every benefit should be attractive to someone, but no one will appreciate all the benefits. So there's a little bit of that rule there. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, no, that's a good statement of like what's a transformative concept that we're all dealing with in one way or another. I'm sure that I know that resonates with everyone on the call. There are a lot of other questions, so maybe I'll just close this out on Rob's note by Tom, again, your willingness to share both your successes and things that haven't worked out, and you know, the struggles to fill the pail as the subscription water runs out, you know. So that's definitely close to the heart of all of us. And I'd also remind you that one thing Renewed has filled is the ability to continue this conversation. So you know, we're all on Guild, and so please, let's continue all of these points on that platform, because it does give us an ability to around the hard issues and the honest realities of what we're up against in this transformation. Stephanie's already put in a plug for the conference that's coming up in September. We're continuing to do webinars for Renewed, which have been great. I think on the offense, next month, Ian Hart in the UK has done a survey of information industry leaders on investment plans. He interviewed like 200 people. And so he's going to share the result of his research exclusive. So next month, that should be interesting to hear too. So if I'll sign off by once again saying, Tom, thanks for being a great friend and part of the community. And to all of the rest of you, good luck as we go into September, as we continue to try to move forward. I wish everyone success on the call. So
Thanks, David.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks, Tom.
Take
Thank you,
care.
everyone.
Thanks.
Good.
And David, before people go, I don't know, John, do you want to, do you have two seconds to just put in a little plug for upcoming events at Renewed?
Well, yeah, I mean, for a whole $199, you can subscribe to something called the Renewed Summit, which has sessions like this and 24 more across 3 days. So it's a great chance to dig in subjects that range from sales and marketing to IT and product development to what you need to know these days as an executive, as a CEO, or an owner. Very, very well built, thanks to people like Ed and Stephanie, and certainly the host of today's show. All of your favorite characters from Renewed will be there, and we hope you all will be there too.
And $50 for additional people from your organization. So
Absolutely.
it's the bargain of the century here. So hopefully
it is. I mean, this business of a $10,000 hour, we're going to have many, many, many $10,000 hours in mid-September. We just aren't going to charge you for them.
Yeah.
Right.
Great.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah. This year we won't charge you for them.
See, that's the
Yeah.
business model I'm trying to get out of.
Exactly.
They're serving up crack for the next year's.
Yeah. Among other favorite drugs, yes. But
Yes. Yeah.
it would be great to have you all. And please share this news, these blurbs with friends and neighbors, daughters, sons, anybody who can post.
And Robert Stagno has a product development workshop coming up too.
He sure does.
Yeah.
I needed that yesterday.
I've signed up for that. So Rob, I'll see you on that one. So
Great.
okay.
Thank
Be
you.
well, everyone. Great to
Thanks
see
very much.
you. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.